My name is Victoria Hanchin, and I'm a holistic psychotherapist who has been a private practitioner here with my own practice in Pittsburgh for about 30 years or so. And for the last 5 years, I've been taking a deep dive into brain neuroscience and discovering about the wonderful neuroplasticity of the brain. Have you been hearing of that term, neuroplasticity? It basically just means science has discovered that our brains are capable of repairing, growing, and changing across our entire lifespan, from birth until death. Just continue to grow and develop with each and every experience we have. And stress, it can work both ways. So we can grow and develop as we keep learning and growing. And excessive stress, especially, the bad kind of stress, we have good stress that helps us perk up and pay attention. And then there's stress that we just get through and our body relaxes and resets. And then there's excessive stress, which is the kind where the hits just come so fast that the body and the brain can't relax, repair, and reset to get the brain repair done that needs to happen ongoing. And so that can affect the brain as well. And the good news is that it's all repairable if we especially know what to do. And that's what we're here to learn about today, how to repair the brain from excessive stress. So the name of our workshop today is Helping Each Other Repair Our Brains from Excessive Stress. And I like to emphasize the each other. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. It's self-directed brain repair, but it's greatly enhanced by mutual assistance in good relationships. I want to demonstrate to you a model of the brain. So I want you to help me with this. Hold your hand up in a fist and tuck the thumb under so your fingers are folded over your thumb. So yeah, that's it. Okay, you all have a model of the brain here. Our brain is in 3 parts. The part folded over on top, this part, hi, that's your neocortex. That's the part that developed last, and that's the part that has really all the higher functions in it. And if you've heard of the brain having an executive function, that's here. And it's the neocortex. So if you open that up, inside the brain is the middle brain, and it's called the limbic brain. And this is the part where the emotional learning is, and it goes in through negative learning much faster and deeper into the limbic system. So there's a lot of emotional stuff that happens here. It has the amygdala in it. Anybody heard of amygdala? And that's the part that signals the fear signals that release the fight, flight, or freeze response of stress. Have you heard of the fight and flight? That's the typical way we think of the stress response. So that's in the middle, so you can close the neocortex back over it. And this part down here comes off the back of the brain. It goes down. It's the reptilian brain. That's the oldest part of the brain. It's in charge of automatic things like heartbeat and the nervous system and some other things. So there's your brain. And the thing is, when excessive stress hits so intensely and so fast and so repeatedly and so chronically that our body doesn't get to go into a relaxed mode, which is what it needs to repair the brain, then it can affect the brain and through the neuroplasticity, alter it. So, for example, the amygdala in here can get over-enlarged. When it gets over-enlarged from excessive stress, it affects our functioning and our behavior. So we over-perceive threat. We even misperceive threat when it's not there. And we overreact to threat. Now, if you look around at what's happening under COVID, which we're obviously still dealing with, and look at the kind of behaviors that we've seen in the media and so forth, you see a lot what looks like overreaction, hostility, violence, irritability, mistrust, all kinds of intensified things. That's really what gets stimulated more and more and more in the fight-flight mode and under excessive stress. So the good news is that all this stress really is repairable. You do have to intervene when stress is at a level of extreme like we've had it under the pandemic. And there are estimates that for every, under normal conditions of life, for every hit of stress that's disruptive, we need 3 positive feeling states to sort of repair the brain from that, to reset the brain from that. But under more extreme stress, we need 5 experiences of goodness for every 1 hit. And you can think back over the past year, year and a half or more, with all that we've been going through as a culture and in the world, and realize life doesn't necessarily provide us automatically with those good hits. So we've got to produce them on our own. And that's basically what brain repair is. And there are many things you can do, and many things you're already doing that you may not even know are brain reparative, so I want to let you know about those a bit too. But today we'll be learning 6 tools, and you have a handout for that. We'll get to it in a bit. And these are tools that you can just go to and really keep in mind this sort of ratio to keep repairing your brain. What the brain needs most to repair is safety, meaning physical safety, but also relational safety. Because we're relational beings. We are mammals. And mammals need social groups to grow, develop, and thrive. So we belong to several kinds of groups, families, communities, our religious groups, our schools and work settings, and we need those places to be safe, and we need them to be positive. The other thing the brain really needs to repair is positive feeling states, because that's what signals the brain under stress that it's safe to relax. And when the brain is under fight and flight, all the neurochemistry of the brain drains for emergency, and the brain cannot repair. It's like an off-on switch. If the fight-flight response is an emergency survival stuff is on, brain repair switches off. So you can imagine over time, with all the hits of stress continuing so fast that we may not be able to settle down and relax and feel like there's enough positive feeling states going on, that it can start causing the amygdala to enlarge. And another thing that happens is the neocortex can shrink. The higher brain function part of our brain can shrink. So those are just some of the ways the brain will change under stress, but we can change it so that it gets to repair. It's going to take choice, remembering and doing it on purpose. I just want to mention that your stress is not just personal. You feel it very personally, but we are actually embedded in layers and levels of stress. So COVID is an example. For these year and a half, 20 months, look at the chaos, look at the uncertainty. The brain loves predictability. Nothing has been predictable, right? The brain loves, safety. Nothing has felt so safe. And information is confusing. The brain doesn't like ambivalence. It likes, in fight-flight mode, it wants black and white thinking. So it wants that clarity. We've been put to the test, and we've got not just personal stress, but then there's social stress. We've seen social upheaval. We've seen hate crimes. We've seen all kinds of stuff. There's the national and political, and you can probably have your own stories about how much that has felt disruptive over these periods of time, especially in this country. Many countries are going through upheavals of political challenges to democracy, and so there's all that. So that's the national and political. There's the international, because the terrorism and what happens in the world of the whole global pandemic and how all that's faring very much affects us personally. And then we have the newer awareness of trauma and even collective trauma and how that affects brain development and even attachment socially in families, and how it even affects future outcomes. Have any of you heard of the ACEs study? It stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, and they're starting to look at childhood when there's been majorly disruptive kinds of experiences, which might include things like family alcoholism, sexual abuse, divorce, upheaval, having to suddenly move, that sort of things. If there's a lot of hits of childhood stress, it actually can affect the developing brain and even a sense of safe attachment, because it's this relational safety factor that's always going on. And so then we add to that, climate crisis now. That's a global. And we know that that's a legitimate, there's even a term being coined of climate anxiety. So we're being hit, and we're surrounded by all these layers of stress. And yes, the news can cause your body to register a flight-fight response. Just like, hearing somebody, trying to break in at your house. So these things are all wrapped around us simultaneously. And then, to just get a little bit personal with you, I discovered there's a seventh level of stress that I'm gonna call medical stress, medical trauma, and simultaneous with the COVID pandemic, I was going through personally a medical crisis that I call my medical free fall that I went through, and it involved a condition that actually began to impair my body's stress response. That's called limbic system impairment. And part of my prescription for recovery included using a brain retraining protocol called Dynamic Neural Retraining System, developed by Annie Hopper, that's excellent and brilliant, and which also validated the 5 years of research I'd been doing in brain neuroscience. And I've been using it all. So this dynamic neural brain retraining system also, by the way, I want to mention, is good for certain medical conditions that are very difficult to treat, and it's also good for COVID long haul. It really helps. That's a limbic system scrambling kind of thing sometimes, the COVID long haul. And some of this brain retraining helps with that. So if you want to ask me questions about that afterwards, feel free. You can do that. So I just want to let you know, I'm not just giving you a bunch of information. I'm really in this brain retraining boat with you and making it real. I've been really, really relying on it and really using it. And it's very impressive how it helps. So my intention today is that we just really have fun together, learning these tools, and that you come to use them like what I call daily brain hygiene. Like you would be brushing your teeth. You would use these tools for good brain hygiene. And that you would help each other remember to do it, even in your families, or even pass it on to friends and coworkers, because you can see how everybody's struggling. I was just talking to a neighbor today, and he told me that he's now on a Holter monitor, and I was starting to show him some of these tools on the spot, on the sidewalk. So they're really easy, and you can pass them on. And I call it, each one teach one. Or even show and tell. Anybody have show and tell in kindergarten growing up? That was always my favorite. And so you can even just feel like it's a show and tell, like, look what I learned, and so that sort of thing. It's just the cool thing is when you're repairing your brain with these tools, there's a ripple effect. It just ripples out to others, because as you're taking care of your nervous system, basically, is what it is, and you're calming down, and some of these tools are very socially engaged ones. I picked them for that reason. It helps others feel more safe relationally and more relaxed and at ease. So you're actually, when you do that, helping the person you're interacting with have a brain repair moment. So how cool is that? You can get a twofer. So I just wanted to recap the definition for excessive stress, which is when stress comes at such intensity or frequency that it hits into the brain signal for fight, flight, freeze, emergency, faster and more repeatedly than the brain gets a chance to slow down, stop, relax, reset, and repair, which requires safety and positive feeling states, okay? Everybody got that? All right, and the neuroplasticity means your brain has the capacity to grow and repair and change across your entire lifetime. And the good news is you're going to learn how to do this on purpose. Because when life doesn't offer it up as a positive experience, we can produce positive experiences. So let me introduce a quick stress scale that I want you to learn to check in with yourself and each other. It's called the SUD, for subjective units of distress, okay? And it rates on a 0, meaning I have no stress, okay, to a 10, which means I'm in emergency mode. Maybe you feel panic even, or you just feel so triggered. And maybe that you can kind of look across your life or the past year. Actually, let's do that right now. So look across the past year under COVID. Think for a minute, how worried were you? Like if you're going to rate it, like 5 is smack in the middle. Like it's getting there, but it's just kind of in the middle. 10 is like, that's probably among the worst I've felt. 0 is like nothing's happening. And this is totally subjective. You can't get it wrong, okay? Because it's a personal, subjective, meaning personal units of distress. So just think for the past 20 months under the pandemic and all that's been going on in the news, all that's been going on with the severe storms, and think of how you're worried, how much have you been worried or not about your family? How much have you felt on edge or not? How irritable? How much have you been worrying about the future? These sorts of things, okay? Don't overthink it, just come up with a number. Everybody have a number? Everybody good? Okay. So let me just take a quick survey. So did anybody have a 0? Okay. Anybody get to 5? Okay. Anybody over a 5? Okay. So keep your hands up if you had over a 5. 5 or over. Okay, so that's about everybody. So at a 5, that's when your brain starts registering some of the stress neurochemistry, okay? And then at a 10, there's a lot of stress neurochemistry. of the kind that you want to, well, actually you want to begin using these tools anytime there's an unsettled moment. But when you're really getting to the higher end of the scale, that's when you want to double down, okay? So you can check in with yourself on a day-to-day basis like that. Like, how is it today for me? Or you can check with one another. Hey, how was your day? On a scale of 0 to 10, where were you today? We can do that with each other, okay? Hey, I want you to know there's really good news all in this too. The research on brain neuroscience has also included the discovery, the confirmation that our brains are also wired for enlightenment. How about that? In the research, what they mean by enlightenment are experiences that are reported as awe, A-W-E, awe, like peak experiences, and experiences of oneness, where you just, like sometimes in nature, you might just feel looking at the beauty, just this sense of wonder, or looking at a baby, just this sense of absolute bliss and joy, or these kinds of experiences that just take you into this higher state. And so our brain is wired for these peak experiences. However, in the last 20 months, probably not that many people have had the opportunity to have those kind of experiences, since survival needs are the brain's priority. So we have, remember this, we've got the 2 lower brains to the 1 higher brain. We're wired for survival, and that will always take precedence. 24/7, our brains are scanning for that. So our brain also has a negativity bias that I mentioned, that in the limbic system, the learning goes in faster and deeper through the negative. And so the brain is always looking for what's wrong. This is what we do. It's not your fault. It's wired that way. So this has to do, the question about whether you lose brain function if you don't use it, the idea is we have, the brain learns through repetition, and that's how we grow neural networks. And so the brain will grow deeper neural networks the more we practice something. It's called what fires together, wires together. So this can include bad habits. It can include brain retraining. So this is why we want to really go into these practices and keep using them. And the more you use something, it gets stored in a part of your brain that actually has you access it faster, even under stress. So if you keep doing these practices, it will become available to you even in crisis, even under stress. And that's really good news too. So thank you. So some of our higher brain capacities are, it's worth mentioning here, especially with the year, the pandemic time we've had. Some of the higher brain functions are intellectual and emotional understanding, okay? Creativity and complex problem solving. Complex problem solving is a higher brain function. The lower brain, fear brain, survival mode function gives you simplistic thinking, black and white, all or nothing. Some of our big decisions might be getting made politically at that level if our leaders are in their survival modes, We have to think about how do we get up to the higher brain. So we've got self-reflection is a higher brain capacity. Empathy. Have any of you been hearing how research has shown empathy going down in the world? Empathy is the capacity to feel with another person and really get them at a feeling level. That skill has been dropping. That's a higher brain function. Compassion is a higher brain function. It's not a, what some people might think it's like a bleeding heart, wimpy bleeding heart thing. No, it's actually a higher brain function, compassion. And so joy is a higher brain function. Peacefulness. altruistic service, where you help others and are generous, that's a higher brain function. So we don't want to lose out on those sorts of things. So we don't want our whole culture to begin devolving either and lose out on those things. So I'm going to introduce you have the handout for the tools that I'm introducing, the brain tools. And I'm going to introduce that with a story. The story is called The Fear Wolf or the Love Wolf. And it's an indigenous story about a grandfather sitting with a grandchild. And this grandfather has just, and the child, they've just witnessed their village being destroyed. And people they love being killed. And they're sitting back looking at the ruins of their village. And the grandfather is kind of clutching his heart, and the grandchild is sitting there, and the grandfather's saying, you know, it just feels like there are two wolves inside my heart fighting. And one of these wolves is the fear wolf. And this fear wolf is absolutely wild with anger and resentment and just wants retaliation, and is filled with hate. And this other wolf is the love wolf, and this wolf is filled with loving compassion and kindness and care, and just feels like they're fighting, all just fighting inside my heart. And the grandchild goes, oh, grandfather, which wolf is going to win the fight? And the grandfather says, whichever one I feed. Yeah. So what we pay attention to, we energize and magnify. We know that, for instance, the shooter here at the synagogue in our Jewish community was on hate sites for hours and hours every day. What we feed, we energize and we magnify. If we feed care and connection and well-being and safety, relational safety, it grows not just for us, but for everyone around us.